Hello and welcome to Steady Self-Improvement. This video is an introduction to the channel. It's divided into roughly 3 parts. The first part is telling you a little bit about the channel. The second part tells you a little bit about me. And the third part is dealing with the pillars and themes of self-improvement that the channel contains. So one of the goals for this channel is I want to see if I can change the way people think about self-improvement. In some areas it has a bit of a bad rep where, people think it's all about getting up at 5 a.m, jumping into an ice bath, putting yourself through all sorts of punishing routines. But for me, it's much more simple than that. It's literally just if somebody wants to lose weight and they go and take some sort of action that helps them to lose weight, then they've started self-improvement. Similarly, if somebody wants to get fitter and they start walking every morning, or even just a couple of times a week, that's self-improvement. So for me, self-improvement is just doing life a little better. And I think when you see it that way and then you start doing more and more of those things, it becomes a habit. And basically it's like a hobby then. What is your hobby? Well, I like to improve myself. I believe that when you start viewing those little positive changes that you make as a form of self-improvement, you make it easier on a psychological level to make better decisions. And I personally think that everybody should have the hobby of self-improvement. I see no reason why you wouldn't. Why wouldn't you want to improve yourself? Everyone wants a better life. Everyone wants to use all the years that you've got on this planet to get the best outcome that you possibly can. So why wouldn't you do this? Why wouldn't you make it a hobby? And there's a reason that I'm a big proponent of making small changes, and it's because the most success I've had with self-improvement is to make small changes and then to just consistently keep building on that, just focus on the small changes, and over time they compound. And I found that I could change things that at one time I never thought it was going to be possible to change. And the way that I did it was just by making these small changes and letting them compound over time. And it's a fantastic way to do this. And that's why I decided to call this channel Steady Self-Improvement, because that's a theme that lies through everything that I want to talk about on this channel, is slow and steady wins the race. So now a little bit about me. I kind of look at my life as if there was 2 chapters, and the first chapter was the old me, and the second chapter is the new me. The old me was young and lacking experience and wisdom, and I made quite a lot of mistakes. I picked up some of the common bad habits that people have. I used to smoke and I used to drink too much alcohol. And I used these things as a kind of crutch to lean on. When things were tough, when I was feeling stressed, I would have a drink to calm down. I would have a cigarette to calm me down, even though these things didn't actually calm me down. But, this is how the mind works. We're not honest with ourselves. When we've got bad habits, we find ways to justify them. We find ways to convince ourselves that they're actually doing us some good. But just like for many people, these bad habits became a bit of a vicious circle because you tend to lean on them when you're stressed, when you're not coping, and then the bad habits themselves cause circumstances which cause you to be more stressed and not to cope. And that's not a good vicious circle to be in. And I lived like this for many years. I wanted to find a way out, but I just couldn't. As I got older and was losing the resilience of youth, I could see that the missed opportunities, the mistakes, the regrets were starting to stack up. And I needed to get out of this mess. And it was only going to get harder. But at some point, it was going to come to a make or break. So I started making some changes. One of the things I did was to go self-employed. Secondly, I found I had a real passion for the gym. I also started playing football again. And from the gym, I found that the punch bag is not only a really good way to stay fit, but it's also a fantastic way to get stress and anger out of your system. So what was actually happening there was that I was starting to explore and understand the connection between the physical and the mental sides of being human. I was starting to understand how nervous system issues like a buildup of stress and tension and anxiety within the body can be eased out by doing something that's beneficial and enjoyable. So as I explored the gym and all the different kind of equipment and exercises I could do, part of what I did was I love to do cardio, and I would do what they call steady state cardio, which is like jogging, swimming, cycling. It's those long-winded exercises that are just steady. And with those, I found that I was able to access this kind of meditative flow state that some call mindfulness in motion. And by doing that, I could kind of kill 2 birds with 1 stone, because not only was I getting really fit from doing it, But I was able to kind of access a mental state where I could do some really productive deep thinking and solve problems that I wasn't able to solve otherwise. So in a nutshell, what I was realizing here was that I could take control of myself for once. I could take control of my mind, my body, and my life, and I could make some really profound changes to my life over time. Unfortunately, I grew up in an environment where the narrative was that the glass was half empty. It was kind of a mindset of passivity where life just happened to us. We didn't really have any control over it, and the most we could hope for was that fate would be kind to us and things wouldn't turn out too badly. Just keep your fingers crossed, that kind of approach to life. I'd never really got to understand that life is much more enjoyable if you try and take control of it, if you push back against life a bit and try and force it to be what you want it to be, and to try and develop your levels of personal agency so that you feel in control, so that you're in the driving seat and you take responsibility for what the outcome is. You don't blame fate. And I'd found it hard to throw off that mindset. But going to the gym started to change that for me. I started to understand that I could do things that could make a difference. So I could find the things at the gym that I was naturally good at. I could find the things that I enjoyed doing. And as well as that, I could find the things where I really enjoyed the after effects for a couple of days afterwards. And after doing this for a while, things started to change. I started to feel some unfamiliar experiences, like being proud of myself, enjoying my achievements, being more open-minded, starting to feel that there could be a better future. And I guess you could say that for the first time in my life, I developed a really healthy addiction. I became addicted to self-improvement. As the old me started to recede a little bit and the new me that I created started to take over and gain dominance, I realized that there was a lot to be gained by looking at the contrast between how the old me used to do things and how the old me used to think about things, and contrast that with how the new me was doing things and how the new me was thinking about things. And this is really valuable, and this has been a fundamental part of my self-improvement, really, is being able to look at the past and look at the present and see the complete difference in how I'm doing things and the outcomes that I get from doing those things differently. And I started to read books by people who'd had similar experiences. People who'd made a poor start in life, made a lot of mistakes, and they'd become driven to do things differently because of those mistakes, because of all the regrets that they had about that, because of the time that they felt that they'd wasted doing things in a poor, inefficient way. They became really driven. They were really driven to have a better life, to make sure they didn't make the same mistakes that they'd made in the past. And these people were driven to make sure that the story that was written by their new me was going to be so much better than the story that was written by the old version of themselves. And I totally identify with that. That was exactly how I felt, and it's how I feel right now. Hasn't changed a bit. Life continued to be challenging and unpredictable for me, but at 37, which incidentally is 20 years ago, I did make that make or break move. I put everything into it, and what I did was I decided to move away from the area where I lived before, the area where I'd grown up, and I was going to move to somewhere where I didn't know anybody. At the same time as this, I'd made some changes in my self-employment. I decided to start an online business as like a one-person business, and I was going to have a big, steep learning curve ahead of me to teach myself some new skills. But I made that move and I went to somewhere completely new. And consequently, I had a lot of time to myself. I read a lot of books, did a lot of learning. I think I knew deep down that if I was going to get rid of the old habits, stop drinking or stop smoking, and really turn myself into the new me that I really wanted to be, then I had to make that move. I had to move away from where I'd always lived because it was just keeping me locked into the old habits. That was 20 years ago, and a lot has happened since then. But what really matters is I did give up those bad habits eventually. I did carry on doing sport and fitness, and I did carry on doing self-improvement, and it became more and more a part of my life, and I spent a lot of time testing things out and finding out what works and what doesn't work. Quitting smoking was one of the things that not only confirmed to me that the old me was being replaced by the new me, but it also gave me the ability to look back on what had happened with a new perspective and to learn important lessons. My nicotine addiction was one of the strongest that I had experienced, and it was on a par with a gambling addiction that I had from the age of 13 until my early 20s, which was a really horrible addiction. and it really ruined my teens and my first years in work when I was 16 years old. When I managed to beat that gambling addiction in my early 20s, I was still quite young, and I still had the nicotine addiction going, and I still had a bit of a heavy alcohol habit. So I didn't have quite the same perspective at that point that I had when I gave up smoking at 44. Giving up smoking led to me having a profound realization. Before I gave up, I knew there would be some really big benefits of giving up smoking. I knew that I would save a lot of money. I knew that my health would improve a lot. I knew that there were various hygiene benefits, like not having smelly fingers anymore, not having bad breath. But I couldn't quite foresee just how much beating the addiction would help me. I wasn't able to foresee that it would really empower me to not be completely enslaved by this addiction anymore. You see, I was the kind of person that would wake up in the morning thinking about tobacco, having a really strong craving before anything else happened. And if I was getting low on tobacco, I would go into a bit of a panic. I was that kind of smoker. I smoked 30 a day, and I was totally addicted to it. Nicotine addiction is really powerful. When I was addicted to it, if I had money for either food or tobacco, I would probably buy the tobacco and just go hungry. It's that powerful. And I grew up in a world where all the adults around me smoked. I was kind of an anti-smoker for a few years until the age of 16, when I finally gave into temptation. Then I just became one of them. And it then became normal to me, just like it seemed to be normal to everybody else. But there's nothing normal about smoking tobacco at all. The compulsion to light up this tobacco, to inhale all of those toxins, all that poison, and make yourself ill, is just completely illogical. But it's really, really powerful. Smoking is basically a form of self-harm. And I was slowly killing myself, just like my mother did. And after 28 years, I was finally able to look back on that and see things from a really different perspective. I was able to feel how it felt to be unleashed from that prison, basically. And that was really empowering, and it led to many other realizations, many other things happening. So I was finally able to look back on this and see the insanity for what it really was. When you're locked into that kind of behavior, it just doesn't make any sense. But you can't, it's very difficult to, in other areas of your life, to go and take your willpower and to try and make positive changes and build positive habits, when the reality is that you are being controlled by this drug. It's controlling you. It's got control of you, your life. So I could then see from that perspective how difficult everything I tried to do in my life was, while I was being weighed down with this thing. And at that point, I wasn't weighed down with it anymore, and a whole new world of possibility opened up to me, and I became really interested in self-improvement. And at this point, I really wanted to understand how my own behavior had ended up being like that. I wanted to understand how I could possibly have ended up in that mess for 28 years of my life. And this led to all sorts of things. I read a lot of books where other people had been talking about this kind of thing, trying to understand human nature and human behavior, why we do the things we do. And then I wanted to understand how I'd been able to pull myself out of this so that I could take these lessons and apply them to any other problems I encountered in my life. And with these questions about why I'd become a smoker and how I'd become a non-smoker, I also asked myself similar questions about all of the other experiences I'd had in life. I wanted to understand about human behavior, about why we do the things we do, and how we change our behavior, how we become influenced by other people, all these topics. I read a lot of books on this subject, I read articles, and it became a hobby in itself, of just learning all about this topic. There was a surprise bonus that came from giving up smoking. You see, I'd always been a fussy eater from when I was very young. I had problems with eating. When I was a teenager, I used to barely eat at all. I was quite thin. And this carried on later into life with the fussy eating in particular. It did get better when I got into the gym and started doing a lot of exercise. That gave me a healthy appetite. But I still had quite an unhealthy diet, and unfortunately I had quite a limited amount of food that I was willing to eat, because I had some weird kind of psychological block on certain foods that stemmed from childhood, and I just couldn't shake it off. But this bonus was that over quite a long period of time, and with the help of my girlfriend, I was able to actually overcome that. I was able to to basically reverse it, to go from being a fussy eater to someone with a really broad, healthy diet. And it's pretty much impossible in a few sentences to put into words the amount of pleasure and happiness that has come from that. It's just absolutely incredible. I mean, it might sound silly, but the joy I get from eating a vine tomato or an olive or some cheese or an egg is off the scale. It's just fantastic. And yeah, it's really been a nice bonus to have. But that has been quite a long-winded process, and there's been many, many lessons that I've learned along the way, which I'm going to be sharing in various videos I'm going to make on this channel. For example, when I first started trying to eat more of, like, for example, vegetables, I didn't eat many vegetables in my meals. I would use small tricks to try and help with that, where I would smother them in some kind of sauce and things like that. And then over a period of years, it's gone the complete opposite way now, where I deliberately eat as many foods as I can without any sauce on at all. I mean, for two reasons really. One is that most sauces aren't healthy if they're manufactured, if they're processed food. It's really a good idea to get rid of those out of your diet if you can, and that's a direction I've been trying to push my diet, to get more healthy and more whole food. But the other reason is because I want to train my body to enjoy the natural taste of those foods, because it's really important, and that opens the door to me eating more and more foods, because my body is trained to want to eat because of the taste of the actual food, not the sauces and other things that we get on our food. So over the last 10 to 15 years, an area that I've studied quite deeply is to do with nutrition and food. And I think it's really important. I really want to share some of the lessons and some of the things that I've tested out and succeeded with, because I think as time goes by, it's more and more important. The food that we eat, the food that we buy from the shops, is generally less nutritious all the time. It's getting worse and worse. And the more we can improve our diet and make good decisions, the better for us, because we need nutrition. And I think it's pretty close to being fact that because our food is lacking in nutrition, many of us are eating too much, because we eat what we used to eat 10 or 20 years ago, and we're not getting the same amount of goodness from them. So our bodies are not satisfied, and we're still hungry, and we don't understand why we're still hungry. But ultimately, we then go and eat more food to try and make up for this. And this isn't working. So this is something I'm really interested in, something that will be featuring on the channel quite a lot. So moving on to the next section in this video, I'm going to briefly talk about the main topics that I delve into on my channel, and then I'll talk about the themes that run through all the self-improvement lessons on the channel as well. So there are three topics here: fitness and strength training, diet and sleep. Now these three topics are all closely tied together, but the fitness and strength training is the key one, because if you make that a part of your life, if you become good at that and you do it regularly, it will enable you to have better sleep and better diet. And if you can make improvements in any of these three areas, it's going to really help you with any other area of self-improvement that you're trying to achieve, because this is your core, basically. This is the base, and all these areas, they are what keeps the machine that is you running properly. So these are just absolutely key. As I say, if you make an improvement in these areas, it can have a knock-on effect in many other areas of your life. So it's really important, and this is the main focus of the channel. So fitness and strength training lies right at the top of the pile, and it's there for a good reason. One of the reasons is that it's a keystone habit. And what that means is that when you do fitness training, it's going to make all the other challenges that you have a little bit easier. So for example, if you want to sleep better, if you go and do some training, you'll be more tired, and it's likely to make you sleep better. Similarly, if you go and do some training, then it's likely to improve your appetite. So if you wanted to eat better food, for example, if you were trying to use willpower to improve your diet, then if you go and do some fitness training, it's going to make your body is going to be wanting the nourishment. So it's going to drive you to make better decisions when you choose what food to eat afterwards. For me personally, I found out quite a long time ago that fitness training and strength training has quite a powerful effect on my mental state. So for example, if I don't train for, let's say, 3 or 4 days, then my mental state starts to suffer. But then as soon as I go and train, I come back and I feel totally different. It's like putting my brain in a washing machine. It comes out the other side and it's all clean and ready for action. And I've noticed this over and over again. Every time I try it, it just comes back with the same result. So I'm totally committed to it. For the rest of my life, I'm going to be training regularly, because I just know how important it is to not only my mental state, but various other aspects of my life. So another reason why fitness and strength training is so important is that it's an important kind of testing ground for things. And this is something that I use a lot when I'm training. And I've learned a lot of lessons from training that I take and I use in other aspects of my life. So for example, I found over and over again that when I'm training, there are areas where you should push yourself and you should push beyond sometimes what feels comfortable, and there are other areas where I've needed to learn to pull back a little bit. And this is really important, and it's basically to do with balance. It's about having balance in your life and being able to regulate that balance, because ultimately we're not machines, we're complex structures, and we have to take care of that. We sometimes need pushing, and we sometimes need nurture and care and kindness. And training is something where I've become much better at knowing when to push and when to pull back, and I can use that in other areas of my life. So on this channel, when it comes to fitness and strength training, there might be some practical stuff. For example, I may go into how to get started, particularly if you're someone of my age. But generally speaking, there are a lot of channels out there with some really, really good information on practical stuff to do with fitness and strength training. So the majority of the stuff that I will be talking about will be to do with the mental side of things, like how to get started, how to keep going, how to train when you don't feel like it but you need to do it, how to push through when you're trying to do something that you don't really enjoy, how to start enjoying it. All that mental side of it, that's the side I want to focus on. So my philosophy on training is that it's a key part of life. It should be a key part of everybody's life. And for me, it's a key part of living well. What I mean by that is that when I look back over the last few decades, some of my favourite moments have been when I've been out in the park in the middle of the day on a really sunny day, running around, sweating, skipping, dribbling a football, lifting some weights. These are some of my favourite moments, and I think part of that is because I feel really aligned at that point. I feel really balanced. And this is linked to a topic that I'm going to talk about on my channel called evolutionary mismatch, where our ancestors for many years were living outdoors, running around hunter-gathering, and our world has changed dramatically, very quickly. And we don't tend to be doing the things that our ancestors did. And that's not a good thing. So for me, it's part of that alignment. It's a part, I have to spend time in artificial environments, in the kind of environments that our ancestors didn't have to go in. But to balance that, I want to spend time in nature. I want to spend time outdoors, and I want to spend time moving, whether that's just walking or whether it's running around, lifting weights and doing vigorous training. I need to be doing those things. And on this channel, I will go into depth about why I think that's important, what the benefits are. This is a topic that I've looked into recently, and I'm going to continue to do so because it really interests me. I'm quite fascinated by the idea that to make up for the way things are in the modern world and how that affects us mentally and physically, that the answer to that is to just do things that are really enjoyable, like going for a lovely walk in nature, walking on the grass, just taking the time to absorb the environment around us. So when we go for a walk in nature, listening to the birds sing, listening to the sound of the environment, the running water in the river or the stream, these things, how much does that actually help us? Is this something that actually has real benefits? And I've been testing that out, and I'm really interested in finding out if it actually can be the solution to a lot of problems people are having in the world today. So after those first three topics, the fourth topic that I'll be exploring on my channel is the mental side of things. That's improving our thinking skills. It's to do with understanding human nature and psychology. It's to do with overcoming bad habits and building better habits. And the fifth topic is environment. And I kind of touched upon this just a minute ago where we were talking about evolutionary mismatch. So environment is really to do with how we can change the environment that we're in, how we can put ourselves into certain environments, and how that can affect us, how that can help us with our mental state, how we can use it to make us feel better, to repair ourselves internally, that kind of thing. The thinking behind this is that the more we learn about this, the more we understand the benefits of these things, that gives us the motivation to do things. So then when we make decisions about what we're going to do with our time, we're more likely then to make better decisions about what we do. So the more we understand about how the natural environment helps us and heals us, the more likely we are to say, I know, instead of going to that shopping centre today, I'm going to take an hour to go for a walk in nature, or I'm going to start getting up just 20 minutes earlier every morning and just walking down the road and walking through that forest, and I'm going to see how it makes me feel. I'm going to see if I can feel the benefits, and then if I can feel them and if I'm convinced that it's a great idea from then onwards, I'm going to try and ingrain it as a new habit. I'm going to make it part of my identity. The flip side of this is getting more educated about the things that aren't so good for us, the environments that may cause us harm. So things like, for example, looking at screens late at night and not having a little break before we go to sleep, spending too much time scrolling on our phone, setting up the notifications on things so that they don't make us feel stressed. These are the kind of things that I'll be talking about on this channel. And on that topic, it's to do with taking control of the things that we can, taking responsibility for making better decisions, so that we can give ourselves the best chance of operating at maximum efficiency, or as close as we can get to that. Finally, the last section of this video, I'm just going to briefly talk about some of what I consider to be the pillars of my kind of self-improvement. So these are just kind of themes, just certain things that may differentiate me slightly from other people, and just so you know what to kind of expect if you're looking at the videos on my channel. So the first pillar I'm going to talk about is that I consider guidelines to be better than rules. And what I mean by this basically is that when I'm trying to change something, if I'm going to push myself and I'm going to need willpower to do something new and different, I will set myself some kind of target. I might say, I'm going to do this thing every day now. And I might, in my mind, I might be thinking, I'll give myself 5 days where I should try and do this. And I'll probably be expecting that after about 5 days, I might have a day or 2 days where I just need a break from it, where pushing that pressure on all the time is too much. And it's almost like my body or my mind rebels against that. And it's like, hey, give me a break. And what happens is when you have a break from doing that, you're able to kind of take stock of how it felt. You can look back on those 5 days and say, okay, how did it go? You know, was it really hard? Is it going to get easy? What do I think? And ideally what happens is that you actually enjoyed this new habit, you enjoyed whatever it was you were doing. And then when you have that small break, if you need to have it, then in that period, you then get drawn back into it. You don't have to push yourself the second time. After a couple of days of not doing it, quite often I find that I then start doing it again because I want to continue. I've enjoyed the benefits of whatever it was I was doing because it was a positive thing to do in the first place, but it might have taken some effort. But I get drawn back into it naturally, and at that point, I'm done. At that point, it's a habit because I've got to that point where I'm naturally wanting to get back into that routine anyway. So I'm not having to try as hard anymore. I'm not having to push. And that's why I feel that guidelines are better than rules. That, you know, because it might be after 3 days you feel that you should have a break. And if your gut is telling you to do that, you should follow that because it's a guideline, not a rule. And over time, you learn to trust yourself with these things. You know that you're not trying to cheat the system. You know you're not trying to just get out of it. You're following your gut, and your gut often knows best. So this is why I have that rule. That's one of the reasons. And the way I look at this is like a pressure on and a pressure off kind of thing, where there are times when you should put yourself into pressure to try and achieve this goal. And there are times where it's wise to take the pressure off, because sometimes there are outside influences. Sometimes something could be happening externally with a certain person that's putting you under stress and pressure. And you just want to be able to just duck out for a day or two and then get back into it. And you will know over time when it's the right time to do that. But again, this is why I like guidelines over rules. The second pillar is called better, not perfect, or progress over perfection. And this is a really simple one. What I'm basically saying here is that we all start at different levels with things. We're all at a different stage. So for example, it can be quite challenging, you know, for example, if you go to a new gym and you're at an early stage of, you know, you've only started going to a gym recently and you don't know all the ins and outs, you're not entirely sure how to use the equipment, and you can feel really uncomfortable. But the way I've got past that in the past is just to remind myself that the only thing that matters is that you're trying. and the only thing that matters is you're trying to get better. So it doesn't actually matter what stage you're at. And I find that's a really useful rule to remember in all sorts of different situations. And I like to apply it as much as I can in these different situations, because the only thing that matters is you're trying to get better. That really does come down to that. So there are times when we feel a bit critical of ourselves. There are times when we are upset because we failed at something. But then you just come back to that rule again. You just say to yourself, was I trying to get better? Yes. So then nothing else matters. We shouldn't be kicking ourselves or feeling shame for not achieving something, because when any of us think about the big achievements we've made, and particularly ones that took a long time, there's all sorts of things that happen along the way to doing that. There's probably a lot of failure, and we should embrace failure as part of the process. So when anyone thinks about those things, you should be looking at it from that perspective that, well, was I trying to get better? Yes. So then it makes it easier to accept some of the other things that you might find difficult to accept. If you remember this guideline, if you remember this pillar, was I trying to improve? Yes. Good. That's all that really matters. Pillar number 3 is to think in probabilities, not certainties. And this mainly applies to learning and the fact that we live in the information age, really, where we've had an information revolution. We've got the internet, and there is loads and loads of information out there, and it's fantastic. You know, we can teach ourselves almost anything we want, but we do have to employ a filter. We do have to understand that not everything that's out there is accurate or correct. So the point is that rather than looking to always get to the bottom of everything and find out the facts, you know, we're better to improve our ability to judge based on probability whether something's right or not, because you can just get lost forever trying to establish facts. You can just keep going and keep going down deep rabbit holes, and that might not be constructive. We might just need to get to a point where we say, okay, I found some authoritative sources, and I'm going to balance all the different points of view I've got from them and try and make a decision based on the balance of probabilities. I mean, for example, a good example of this is with anything to do with diet and food. It's quite often you can try and research and understand something and find that you've got 2 authority sources that are both telling you the exact opposite. And who do you believe? So it's a skill to develop. It's the skill to be able to look at all the information that's out there and then say, okay, on the balance of probability, I'm going to assume that this is the right thing to do. So I'm then going to take that and test it and find out for myself if it really was the right thing. I'm going to measure the results and see if it was right. Pillar number 4 is called environment over willpower. And what this means is that if you want to achieve, let's say, a series of self-improvement goals, and you have a dysregulated nervous system, if you're full of anxiety and stress, then you're going to find it harder. Whereas if you have a regulated nervous system, and if you're actively doing things to lower your stress levels, to lower your anxiety levels, then you're going to find those things easier. So in other words, we should be learning as much as we can and as many tricks and skills as we can that help us to stay calm and help us to look after our nervous system, to help us to achieve the goals that we want to achieve. As I mentioned earlier, I'll be talking about evolutionary mismatch on this channel and how that relates to our nervous system. So what I'm talking about there is that I believe we should all be trying to do various different things that will help us to regulate our nervous system and help us to reduce the amount of stress and anxiety that we're holding inside our bodies. And these things don't have to be complicated, and they can be really pleasurable and enjoyable things to do. So for example, I think most people should at least once a week be taking some sort of trip out into nature, whether that's walking alongside a river, whether it's going to a nice forest, or just going out into the countryside. But I feel that it's important to get away from the hustle bustle once in a while, to get away from the human world and all the traffic and the noise, and try and go somewhere where the sounds that you hear are natural sounds, the sound of birds singing, the sound of a river flowing, all these kind of things. I believe that this can help to regulate our nervous system, help us to reduce stress and anxiety. And ultimately, what I'm referring to here is that those things will give us a better chance of achieving the goals that we're setting for ourselves when we're trying to improve our lives, when we're trying to give up bad habits and develop new good habits. We need as much help as we can get. And I believe that following this path is a way to give ourselves a helping hand. Pillar number 5 is to improve our thinking skills. So some examples of what I'm talking about here is that we should be getting in touch with our inner narrator. We should be listening to the voice that talks inside our heads, and we should be trying to influence that to talk in the right way and not the wrong way. We want to develop a glass half full attitude if we can, and always be promoting that internally, so that when we listen to our own voice, when it's automatic, when we're not even thinking about it, we want to have pre-programmed that to be saying the right things to us, to helping us to achieve our goals. Another aspect of this is learning to be honest with ourselves. A good example of this, if you've ever been around drinkers, is that people with bad habits are very good at fooling themselves. I've had people who are saying, like, beer is food, so it's good for me. And, I used to tell myself that smoking cigarettes calmed me down. It doesn't. Scientifically, it doesn't do that. It does the opposite. But we have these ways of deceiving ourselves. So I like to try and find those things and then cancel them out with the truth. And the good part of this is that when we do this, we can actually turn it right round on its head, and then we can use our thinking skills that we've developed so that we can actually create really powerful arguments inside ourselves that are actually based on logic. They're arguments that we can't argue back against. And if we do that, if we make it a habit, then we can create these arguments, and we can use those arguments to drive ourselves to do things. So when we have to make a decision, when we're thinking, oh, should I do this or should I do that? We've already got this argument built into our head that says, well, it's important to do X because Y will happen if we do it. And then when that argument just pops into our head, then we're like, yeah, okay, I'm going to go and do X then. It's all that kind of thing. But on this channel, I want to be talking a lot about how we improve our thinking skills, how I've improved mine, and ways that you might be able to improve yours too. Pillar number 6 is consistency compounds. And what I mean by this is that when we develop new habits and we go and act on those habits, we go and do whatever it was, let's say it's to do with exercise, and we start regularly doing it, then the benefits of that compound over time. So it's important to understand that when we start doing something and we've been doing it for a period of time, it can feel quite hard, it can feel quite difficult when you feel like you're getting nothing back. And that's typically the case with, say, fitness, or let's say trying to lose some weight. You have that period where it plateaus, where nothing's happening and you're still putting the effort in. And that inner narrator, that little voice in our head, is often arguing with us and saying, I'm putting all this effort in but getting nothing back. Maybe I should just give up. And you have to get through that part, because you have to believe that consistency compounds. So over time, when you keep doing something, the benefits are compounding. And what that means in real terms is that if you become consistent, if you concentrate on becoming consistent and just cancelling out that negative voice in your head and just keeping going, then eventually you will reap the benefits. And when they arrive, they will have compounded. And this is particularly important when it comes to making big changes. Sometimes, like giving up bad habits like I did, that took years to give up smoking, for example. Sometimes you just end up thinking that you're never going to be able to do it. But once you've done this once you've experienced the fact that these small efforts continually done over a period of time compound into great big changes, then it's not so daunting to apply that to something new in the future. You know from experience that if you just keep going and doing the right thing, if you keep doing it consistently, eventually the benefits will compound, and one day it will just happen and you'll be rewarded. The final pillar of my self-improvement is tracking. A good example of this is that I use a website called MyFitnessPal, which is a free website you can use where you track what you eat each day. And I find this really useful. It's got a variety of uses. I mean, one of the typical uses is that you can track your macros, you can see how much protein you're getting and things like that. But really, I find the biggest benefit is that it helps you not to deceive yourself, which I'm always doing with food. I forget that I had a snack here or something there. And by writing it all down, by seeing how many calories you've had, it just keeps you on track and it keeps you honest. So I've been using that on and off for quite a while. And I started tracking a lot of other things. I track my sleep patterns. If I have problems sleeping, I get up in the morning and I write down what happened, what time it happened, if there was any triggers, that kind of thing. I track what I do with my fitness. I write down what I did in my workout, and that allows me to try and constantly try and beat my all-time high. You know, if I'm at a certain point where I can do X amount of reps or X amount of minutes or this many jogs, this many sprints, then I can keep track of that. And it's too much to expect your brain to remember all these things. It's just not going to happen. So if you write it down, then you can track it and you can start cross-referencing things. You know, when something big happens, you can say, oh, did this cause that? You know, if you've changed your diet. So I try and track as many things as I can without getting sort of bogged down with it, just on a very simple level. Just make notes of anything that you think is important and get in the habit of tracking it, because I find it really useful. And sometimes you can't always foresee how beneficial it's going to be. But yeah, I try and track as many things as I can. I track my weight and I track my BMI and my fat levels and my muscle levels. And quite often I get some very interesting insights from doing that. So that's the end of this video. Thank you very much if you've watched all the way to this point. I hope that's given you a good insight into what you'll find on my video channel. If you do like this video, please like and subscribe if you can. That always helps me. And if you want to know more about exercise being a keystone habit, watch this video here. Thank you.